There we go. So, thank you all for coming this evening. And so this is the first time that we've had somebody on this programme that's not in England. So it's quite exciting. David Rovics has performed at Bolton Socialist Club, but we were talking about it the other day, and we think it was probably about 4 years ago, because we think that his second child was just about to be born when he was in Bolton last time. So yeah, so quite a long time really.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for being here, Dave. And I guess you've just had your breakfast and got your children off to school.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Although today, they don't have school on Friday, but they went off with their mom on a little adventure. So yes, I'm alone in the living room, which is very helpful when you're trying to talk when there's a baby around. It doesn't really work.
No, difficult. So, you were, I believe, born in New York in 1967.
True.
But you moved to Wilton, Connecticut when you were quite young.
Yeah. Yeah, my parents took the family there in 1970, so I was very young.
Oh, so do you remember being in New York at all?
Oh yeah, because I mean, I remember New York because we would go to New York a lot when I was a kid, because my parents both worked there in various ways as performers and teachers, and I mean, they both taught mainly in other places like Long Island University, which is not New York City but kind of nearby. But there was always reasons to go to New York City. So I often felt dragged along, but I went there a lot.
And I was looking up Wilton, and this big thing came up saying that it was the third safest place to live, and then in very small letters underneath it said in Connecticut. So so not quite as safe maybe as I first thought, but it looks quite rural. There's quite a lot of, for America, historic buildings there. Was it a nice place to grow up?
I mean, it's very woodsy suburb, and probably like when I was very young, people would not have thought of it as a suburb, and then but by the time I was, pretty much a kid, it was a suburb of New York City. It's like a town away from any suburb that's actually on the train line. So it's not a easy access suburb, but it's a suburb nonetheless, and then as I was growing up, it became a far more expensive and wealthier place. So, oh, somebody's not muted there, and they're watching football or something.
No,
Maybe it's
sorry, that's me getting the next piece of music ready.
Yeah, so it's yeah, Wilton. Yeah, so it's. I don't think there's. I wouldn't think it's noted for historic buildings so much as noted for having been. I mean, it was once farmland, and then it was grown over by forest, and then it became a sort of a suburb, and eventually a very well-off suburb. So yeah. My parents, as college professors, were sort of part of the, comparatively part of the working class. Most people wore business suits and worked in tall buildings in Manhattan.
Right. Okay.
I mean, the guys did. The fathers of the families.
The women stayed home.
The women stayed home generally, mostly in the town I grew up in. That was very, very common. Yeah, and not in my family, but it was very common.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we have a listen to your, as I've got it set up, your first piece of music, which you've chosen Christy Moore, Natives. and you said that he's one of the most engaging performers who's ever lived, and that this is one of the most perfectly written songs.
Yeah, and I don't even remember the name of the guy who wrote it, but it's an amazing song, and it was definitely going through my head when I was trying to come up with that list, and it's been on my mind a lot. That song, especially in light of recent events around here with the very polarized society.
Yeah. So we'll have a listen to the wonderful Christy Moore. And we've chosen a live performance.
This song was written by a friend of mine from Sallynoggin called Paul Doran. You may remember Paul from last year. He wrote the song for South Aid. This is the song which he's written recently. For all of our languages, we can't communicate. For all of our native tongues, we're all natives here. Sons of their fathers dream the same dream. The sound of forbidden words becomes a scream. Voices in anger, victims of history, plundered and set aside, grown fat on swallowed pride, with promises of paradise and gifts of beads and knives. Reasoned pioneers are soldiers in disguise, saviors and conquerors, they make us wait. The fishers of men, they wave their truth like bait, with the touch of a stranger's hand. Innocence turns to shame. The spirit that dwelt within now sleeps out in the rain. For all of our languages, we can't communicate. For all of our native tongues, we're all natives here. The scars of the past are slow to disappear. The cries of the dead are always in our ears. Only the very safe can talk about wrong and rights of those who are forced to choose. Some will choose to fight. For all of our languages, we can't communicate.
Even with all that compression, it's still such a powerful song. I wonder why all that compression happens, though. You're just playing a good recording from YouTube, but it sounds, well, at least when I hear it, it's all like distorted. But still, such a good song. I wonder what's going on.
It's very difficult on Zoom, isn't it?
I mean, on other platforms too, and I'm just not sure what's. I mean, if you muted your own mic, maybe that would help, but I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know. I interviewed Steve Wozniak recently, and he said those who design digital technology should be forced to live with it, because we were having audio problems, and he basically invented the computer, but we couldn't get the audio straight for the first 30 minutes.
So, as a teenager, you seem to have got involved in quite a lot of different things. Vegetarianism, nuclear disarmament. I read that you described yourself as an anti-Zionist Jew. So I wonder, I became a vegetarian when I was a teenager, and my mum was convinced it was just a phase I was going to grow out of very quickly. I wonder how supportive your family were of you getting involved in stuff like that.
They were very supportive, but I mean, my mom. The thing was that really, in retrospect, and I wasn't fully conscious of it at the time, but really, looking back at it, the reason why I was being exposed to most of these kinds of ideas as a kid was because of the stuff that came in the mail from my mom. I mean, this was before the internet, but there was mail and there was junk mail, but there was also mail that you'd get from activist groups and nonprofit groups that you supported or that you were somehow or other subscribed to. And so she subscribed to, well, both some sort of progressive publications, but also just she'd get like sort of mail from groups like the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, who are just looking for donations and stuff. But just reading that stuff, I was like, whoa, that pretty much, I think it was basically a PETA flyer that got me to become a vegetarian. I fell off the wagon eventually, but I was a vegetarian for 8 years. And the thing was, when I became a vegetarian, my mother was already tending in that direction, so it didn't take much to push her over the edge. Suddenly one of her 2 children is a vegetarian, so basically the rest of the family had to go along with the program. And I remember my dad occasionally cooking hot dogs for like him and my sister, just to sort of be a little rebellious now and then, but they basically became vegetarians too, by default.
Right. Okay, I'm just making sure that we've got the next piece ready. There we go. Good. So that I'm always amazed when people talk about their families being supportive.
Yeah, right. There's so many who aren't.
Yeah.
I love how you're being the host and the engineer here. The thing is, if on BBC, just so you know, they have a team of people doing this stuff. There'll be at least 2 or 3 people dealing with queuing up the next song. You wouldn't have to worry about that at all. If anybody thinks, oh, this is very unprofessional, well, that's why. They'd also have a faster computer.
Yeah,
on both ends.
So our next piece of music is from Rob Johnson, Madrid. Rob is someone else's great friend of the club and has done his Desert Island discs a little while ago. So it's really nice to see that you've chosen a song by him. And you chose Madrid specifically, which isn't one of his best known songs, I don't think.
Yeah, I suppose not. I mean, Anarchy in Hackney Now, would that be, what's his best known songs? I don't know, but I love Madrid, and he writes so many songs about history, and his favorite decade, I'd have to say, would be the 1930s, although he's written lots about prior to then, and also the 1940s, of course. But he's one of the. I mean, there's other people writing brilliant stuff about history, but Rob is easily among the very best of people writing that kind of material. I love all his stuff, but especially his history songs, and also the ones that are about his own family's personal intersection with history, like the one about his grandfather and taking his grandmother to the fields of Flanders. Yeah, I mean, I could have chosen any number of other songs, but Madrid is a very powerful one.
Yeah. So So again, we've chosen a live version of this, and Rob is looking quite young in this.
Oh, wow.
Well, look at you now, Generalissimo. In your valley of lost souls, dug by the prisoners of your war, how your soldiers would sing, long live death for you. But look at you now, you're just another bullfight. And each child born is born an anarchist, scratching their names on your sad old mouths. Love, love is an anarchist, scratching our hearts on the walls of every city, like Madrid. I remember one day coming home from school with this clay clenched fist I'd made. My father smiled and said, "Do you know what that means?" My dad taught me how to find out for myself. That's how I found Madrid, where each child born is born an anarchist, scratching their names on your sad old mausoleums. And love, love is an anarchist, scratching our hearts on the walls of every city, like Madrid, like Madrid. So you with the medals, you and whose army you don't win either. You're just another bullfight. We rise to our feet, clenching our fists in some hospital bed. But in our hearts, this is Madrid. 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 Madrid, where each child born is born an anarchist, scratching their name on your sad old mausoleums. And love, love is an anarchist, scratching our hearts on the walls of every city, like Madrid. At the siege of Madrid, upturned faces of the...
Sorry.
And then,
So,
like, even the
both
touch
your
at the end of
Oh,
the
yes,
song,
sorry.
you notice how he ends with this this little sort of like almost like the sound of like a military marching kind of song at the end. I just love that little tiny touch at the end with just the very and what a song. Yeah, what a songwriter.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So both your parents are musicians.
Mm.
So was there, I mean, I'm guessing that there must have been a lot of music in your house as
Yeah,
you were growing up.
from before I woke up until after I went to sleep, pretty much. Yeah, it was constant. And my mother tended to practice, play the piano, especially very early in the morning. So basically that's the first sound, was very loud sounds of a grand piano, kind of waking up the whole neighborhood. I mean, just the house, really. Nobody else was nearby enough to hear it. But
And what kind of music did your parents play?
my mother is well, they're both they both are into classical music and contemporary, sort of what became of the classical tradition. My father's a composer and as well as a pianist, and my mother plays a lot of, I mean, when I was growing up, and still, but especially when I was growing up, she'd be usually practicing for some kind of upcoming concert, although mostly she was teaching for a living, but she was playing enough concerts that she was often working up material for the next concert. So it was often really advanced, recently written, challenging kind of 20th century atonal cacophony, basically, really wild stuff, stuff that a lot of people don't recognize as music because it has no recognizable, no discernible melody or rhythm, but.
So your musical influences then presumably came from somewhere else.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I got into, I got into rock and roll, and then kind of through the back door got into sort of bluegrass and traditional Irish and other forms of traditional sort of folk music, kind of originally through my interest in a lot of 60s rock bands who themselves were influenced by that kind of music. So, it was kind of that kind of avenue, I was exposed to Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie as a kid, but I didn't really embrace them until I got exposed to them through the Grateful Dead. And then I really got into them, That was the roundabout trajectory.
Yeah. Okay, so your next piece of music then is Attila the Stockbroker. Maggots 1, Maggie 0.
And me and Attila, I think we did 14 tours together, mostly in Britain, but also in the US and Denmark. And he's just a fantastic performer, and he's written a lot of really great serious songs as well. But his sort of comedic stuff like this is just perhaps when I don't know, somebody described him as he's in full flight in at moments like this song.
Yeah. Yes. So Margaret Thatcher. Okay, here we go. Oh no, it's done it again.
It was there before.
It was there before.
It started playing.
Okay, so we'll just go back into YouTube and get it from the start. Sorry, I don't know. It happened last time as well.
I think it's impressive that you can be doing these multiple things at the same time. And also, I don't know how fast your computer's processing speed is, but
Faces of
There we go.
war,
there we go.
gaze at them in France of yore, swinging in the gibbet cage against the sky. See the tyrants' bones picked clean, rulers once now just cuisine for fly. Come that final glorious day, treat that bastard the same way. No pine box, no wreath of flowers, with her safe inside. Let's give her a fitting fate, string her up by Tyburn Gate, then get pissed and celebrate. Party! Thatcher's died! Magnus 1, Maggie nil, hallelujah. 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 All the folk that she forgot, sing and dance and watch her rock. Homeless hope is poor and ill, bring that coward you. Arthur Scargill lead the cheers, watch those printers sink their beers. No such thing as society, no such thing as you. Magnus 1, Maggie nil, hallelujah. 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 What a party, what a giggle, sing some ale and watch them wriggle. People all across the land singing with one voice. Never seen a crowd so vast, ecstasy quite unsurpassed. Maggie Thatcher's breathed her last, crush her and rejoice. Magnus 1, Maggie nil, hallelujah. 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 Magnus 1, Maggie nil, hallelujah.
And he wrote that song many years before Maggie actually died, you know, and it was like so much more fun singing it before she died, you know, like as a just kind of like way to say fuck you to Maggie when she was alive, you know. And then after she actually died, the song had no real power anymore, you know. I mean, like I don't remember him actually. It wasn't really much of a party, you know, and people he didn't sing the song much after that, you know. It was real, but it was a really fun song in those years, you know, before she died. I thought that was the best part of was the unceremonious, also the unceremonious attitude towards mortality. I really like that too, because we all die. The maggots all win in the end.
And it's really uncomfortable, I find, even just seeing her face on the screen like that. She has this effect. But all of the live ones that we could find were such bad recordings with, you know, people talking at the bar. And so just they wouldn't have worked this evening at all.
With live recordings, the good live recordings are always made when the crowd is really loud, and the bad recordings are made when the crowd is really quiet, and it's just so hard to get it right, you know. The best gigs when the crowd is like singing along with every word, those are never recorded. You know? Only the ones when people are talking at the bar, you know.
So in 1985 you went to college?
Briefly, I did, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, in what I read, it just said that you dropped out, but it didn't say what course you were studying.
I mean, I was only there for like a little more than a year, so I was never really, I never had time to actually declare a major, but I was thinking of probably studying history, and I probably more or less dropped out because I just couldn't imagine how much reading was involved with actually keeping up with it, and I didn't realize that people didn't actually do that. You know, the people were just like skimming and everything. Nobody really trained me on that certain aspects of how to be a student, so I didn't realize you actually didn't have to read all that stuff, and I just basically freaked out and dropped out at the age of 19 or something. and then never really. I did go back to college for a few months later, but then, but by then, I mean, a few years later, but by then my sort of trajectory as a musician was pretty set, and I didn't think I needed to bother with any more higher education. I could just read books.
Yeah. So you started busking and working as a musician as soon as you dropped out. Is that?
Basically, I mean, I dropped out of college, and then I was busking and then working also as a secretary and doing all sorts of different jobs. But then by the time, but eventually, I was actually busking full time. I kind of figured out how to make that just barely work, even though I was doing really inappropriate songs to actually make any money busking. I mean, there's all this obscure left-wing stuff and all these old labor songs. I mean, it was just not at all what you should do if you want to actually make money busking. But I somehow managed to survive doing this kind of material as a busker in the mid 90s and for several years, and then started touring with other musicians by 97, and then that's the last time I did any busking was 97.
So when you were busking, were you performing songs that you'd written yourself, or did you go back to the Woody Guthrie stuff? What kinds of stuff did you perform?
When I was busking, I was pretty much only doing other people's material, and when I first started busking, it was really in order to just in the 80s, it was really just as a to have a place to practice, because I was methodically trying to get good at this kind of craft of playing music and basically memorizing lots of other people's songs and playing them as well as I could the way they played them, and so that was what I was trying to do, and so rather than doing it in my little efficiency apartment in Seattle, I would go to the Pike Place Market and sing for people there, and so that was I was doing a lot of that, and for about a year and a half, it was all the practice was basically paid for by the Aetna insurance company, because I got carpal tunnel syndrome on the job as a secretary, and then they gave me just barely enough to survive on for about a year and a half after that. So I used the time to learn how to play the guitar better, basically. Yeah.
So that was kind of lucky in a strange sort of way.
It was the best injury that ever happened to me. Absolutely. Yeah. Because I probably never would have taken all that time to play music if I didn't have to, except that I didn't have to work for a while, and then after that year and a half or so, I couldn't go back to other forms of work. So I just kept on playing, music, because by then I had figured out how to barely sort of eke out a living at it, and also back then it was strange to say, I don't feel that old, but 20 years ago it was a lot. Everything was a lot cheaper. I mean, rent, especially the main expensive housing was, I was sharing a room with my girlfriend, paying $180 a month, for rent, which 1/10 what I'm paying for the apartment I live in now. So obviously it was a different situation. You could survive on busking, more realistically. Yeah.
Okay, so the next piece of music then is the Ballad of 75, Roaring Jack, with Alistair Hewlett, who's someone I've not heard of before.
Yeah, Alistair Hewlett unfortunately died much too young some years ago. When it was it now? Several years ago. He was 58, I believe. But he is a Scottish songwriter in his latter years lived in Glasgow and was in a band called the Malkies. But he, from at the age of, I believe, young teenager, 16, 17, he moved, his family moved to New Zealand, and then he soon thereafter moved to Sydney, where he lived for 25 years, Sydney, Australia. And he was really on the ground floor of what we might now call Celtic punk or folk punk or something like that. I mean, this fusion of basically the punk and acoustic music, which was basically what Roaring Jack was, although I don't know what name they were giving it back then. But it was groundbreaking stuff. And me and Alistair did a number of tours together as well before he died.
I think Chris is having trouble getting in, so he's trying on Trudy's now. So we will screen share and have a listen to that.
Called Roaring Jack, and they commemorate the latter occasion with the Ballad of 75.
I remember the day I was no more than a boy, working in an oxide plant at the back of North Fitzroy. Bert Gilchrist told the gaffer, 'cause Bert Gilchrist had the clout. He said they given got the bullet, and the lads are walking out. And we walked right up that job while the gaffer held the door and watched it on the telly in a TV rental store. It was one hell of a situation, the kind you just can't gauge. There was God on the steps of Parliament House saying no, maintain the rage. In the year of the double dissolution, drinking in the streets gave way to doubt. Australia voted in a revolution, then stood back and let the fat cats push it out. There was violence in the air as I walked back home God's night. Everyone you'd meet was getting ready for the fight, saying if they're out for trouble, then trouble's what they'll get. We started out a colony, didn't think we're a colony. In the year of the double dissolution, drinking in the streets gave way to doubt. Australia voted in a revolution, then stood back and let the fat cats push it out. But as the weeks went by, the anger turned to wild relief. Locks were freed like magic, and I watched it disbelief. To see a scam so blatant, so chopped up and full of holes, and the people in their thousands endorsed it at the polls. And the year of the double dissolution, drinking in the streets gave way to doubt. Australia voted in a revolution, then stood back and let the fat cats push it out. Some said they had it coming, some were closer to the mark. They spoke about conspiracy, China star in dark. But history records it, and the story will be read. And we let them take democracy and stand it on its head. In the year of the double dissolution, drinking in the streets gave way to doubt. Australia voted in a revolution, then stood back and let the fat cats push it out. Australia voted in the revolution, then stood back and let the fat cats push it out.
It's a song about
great
when
song.
a song about the when the Queen of England somehow or other overthrew the democratically elected government of Australia in 1975. And in case anybody missed that one, I never even heard about it until I went to Australia. John Pilger's book, A Hidden Country, is a fantastic book that includes some of that shocking history.
Mm. Okay, so from about 1990, so not long after you became, well, I mean, I'd say not long, 5 years, I guess, is quite a while to survive. But you started doing world tours.
Oh, let's see. So I was, by 97, I was touring full time, playing with other musicians, backing them up and opening for them in a couple different outfits. And then basically by the following year, I was doing that by myself as a solo artist, mainly around pretty much all exclusively around the United States. And then basically within about a year of that, um, I basically started touring in Europe, and it probably wouldn't have happened so soon because I was doing very well touring in the U.S. I mean, it was the global justice movement was going on, and I had a big audience, at least big enough to be having too much to do as a musician just in the U.S. And then but then I got in a relationship with somebody from Hamburg that I met in Colorado, and then went to Germany with her, and then started playing in Germany a lot around the anti-nuclear movement that she was involved with. And then because I was in Germany, I sort of quickly made contacts in Denmark and started touring there, and then I put together a tour in England, which was a total disaster. But then through that, I met musicians who really knew what they were doing, like Attila. And then the next year, I started having just fantastic tours in England with Attila mainly, and also on my own as well. And so basically, that it sort of expanded, not necessarily really one country at a time. I mean, each country it has its own reason why I started touring there. It's just that's how it actually has worked for me. It's never been entirely like a regional thing. Although because I'm in one place, obviously that makes me want to, find other things to do nearby. So certainly that's why I was especially interested in going to Denmark when I was already living more or less in Hamburg for a couple of years. That was sort of an obvious, like, yeah, whatever you're doing, I'll come check that out, because it was nearly, it was 4 hours drive. So.
Yeah. And so you, most of your career then you've performed solo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although I've toured with other musicians a fair bit, but mostly solo, about 98%.
So is that because it's easier to tour on your own and just sort yourself out, or do you like just working on your own, or?
Oh, it's entirely for financial reasons. I would love to tour with other musicians. I would love to play with a band, like for musical reasons. It would be really exciting. And I especially love vocal harmony. I would, if I could, I'd always be touring with at least one other musician if I had my druthers. But it's just so expensive when you're feeding more than one mouth. And of course, when you're feeding 4 or 5, then you need to have an audience that corresponds to that. So, I'm not getting a big enough draw. Of course, it's a bit of a chicken or the egg thing, because once you are touring with a band, and then it opens up other possibilities for maybe broadening your audience. But I've never figured out how to make that, how to take that dive, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Luckily for this style of music I do, it's not especially necessary. You know, it's not like I need to be playing with a band to do this kind of music, but yeah.
Apologies. Yeah. Can you still hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. We have an advert that suddenly appeared. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought I
As like a Zoom advertisement or something.
yeah, on
And
YouTube.
and then a YouTube advertisement.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so you got to
So,
like, you know, let it run until it yeah.
yeah. Apologies.
See, these are, it's one more thing BBC doesn't have to deal with, you know.
We've done quite well. We've not had many adverts this evening so far. So this is Daniel Viglietti. Is that,
Yeah.
have I pronounced that
Uh-huh.
correctly?
Yeah. Yeah, and Daniel Viglietti, and I think you're going to play a song of that he did at live in Managua, Nicaragua, in 1983. Yeah. And Daniel Viglietti and Silvio Rodriguez and Pablo Milanes, Victor Jara, Mercedes Sosa, Violeta de Parra. There's this whole crowd of folks from all over Latin America that are just like household names all over Latin America. Although it has to be said that certainly Silvio Rodriguez sort of stands, you know, sort of a head above the rest as a sort of basically godlike figure. I mean, definitely Bob Dylan would be the closest you could come to a comparison for North American, you know, I mean, or Neil Young or something. I mean, he's just tremendous figure in Latin America, but I mean, maybe unlike some of those other people, like so deservingly so. But then there's so many others that and Daniel Viglietti is another one of these that is just not nearly as well known as Silvio Rodriguez or even Victor Jara, but this song just captures the spirit of the resistance against Yankee imperialism. I think just really brilliantly, and I think that's also in this recording. That's also so clear when you look at the audience and hear their reaction too. Yeah. And bear in mind that there's a civil war going on at the time.
So, I'm not sure if we've still got a bit more advert to come, but here we go.
It's not that easy, but Grammarly can
help. Just a little more.
This sentence is grammatically correct.
There you go. Now we skip the ad. Here we go.
Si Nicaragua venció, pero también vamos a decir que Uruguay vencerá. Si Nicaragua venció, el Uruguay de Raúl Sendic, el Uruguay de Líber Sereñi, el Uruguay de José Artigas. Yo pregunto a los presentes si no se han puesto a pensar que esta tierra es de nosotros y no del
que tenga más. Yo pregunto si en la tierra nunca habrá pensado usted que si las manos son nuestras, es nuestro lo que nos dé. A desalambrar, que la tierra es nuestra, es tuya y de aquel, de Pedro y María, de Juan y José. Si molesto con mi canto alguno que ande por ahí, le aseguro que es un gringo, un dueño del Uruguay. A desalambrar, que la tierra es nuestra, es tuya y de aquel, de Pedro y María, de Juan y José. Yo pregunto a los presentes si no se han puesto a pensar que esta tierra es de nosotros y no del que tenga más. A desalambrar, que la tierra es nuestra, es tuya y de aquel, de Pedro y María, de Juan y José. Que la tierra es nuestra, es tuya y de aquel, de Pedro y María, de Juan y José. Viva.
That's a song that could lead you into the revolution, huh? You can just, I'm ready to grab the pitchfork. Yep.
So Dave, you are quite famously, I think, a wobbly. And quite a lot of people have said, what on earth is a wobbly? And I wondered if you'd like to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, a wobbly is just a member of the union, the industrial workers of the world. And the union is very much still exists and is involved with organizing workers in various places, small places like Burgerville and here in Portland. But it was 100 years ago, it was the biggest, most militant labor union in both the US and Canada. And it also was active in many other countries, especially countries that had maritime, a lot of it spread among the longshore workers and the seafarers first, and then, into other countries from there. But they were active in varying degrees at varying times in Mexico and Australia and other countries as well. But I think it's to some extent it's almost it's being a wobbly or being a member of this union or being a fan of the history of the union. It implies other things, but certainly for me, it's about the whole approach that the union took, which I think is so valuable in so many different ways, and the emphasis on culture that was part of their whole approach, and also the sort of anarchistic organizing strategies they employed, which I think were especially effective at a time 100 years ago when most people were what we would now call gig economy workers, or what they then called seasonal workers or itinerant workers. I mean, that was the norm, whether you're talking about garment factories or logging or mining or any number of others. It was all seasonal work. And so it was very hard to organize workers in any kind of traditional union. But the IWW, their approach was very effective, and the crackdown against them was just absolutely tremendous, and also very notable that they've been largely written out of our histories, even though they were massive influential movement at the time. So that's in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So your next piece of music is Shell Shock, Tracy Curtis.
Another artist from your side of the pond that I've toured with a bit, and also that Attila has toured with as well quite a bit, and just a brilliant songwriter. And I think this song, Shell Shock, is like, I mean, there have been so many incredibly powerful songs and poems written about the First World War. But this has got to be certainly one of the very best ever written on the subject.
Okay. I'm afraid we're going to get another advert.
Hopefully it's a funny one.
Things have been a little different for us all recently, but again.
Here we go. Skip ads.
I'm going to do Shell Shock again, which is one I did earlier. At this point, I usually explain that my songs do actually get more cheerful as the set goes on. This one is called Shell Shock, and it's a song I wrote for all the soldiers who were shot for desertion during the First World War. This is the story about my son. He was like lots of other boys, spent hours playing in the dirt with his toys till the sun went down and he tucked him in bed. He'd smile and say, I love you, Mom, more than anyone. A little older and he's not such a little boy, no time for toys. He was like all his other friends, spent hours playing in the fields with the girls till the sun went down. Then he'd come home and kiss me, smile and whisper, I love you, Mom, more than anyone. 18 and the world had gone to war, a child no more. He wanted to be like all his friends, spent hours fighting in the dirt for his country till the sun went down. Then he come up a hero, smile and say, I love you, Mom, more than anyone. My gentle boy was not prepared for what he saw. The sight of blood, the smell of death, the sound of war. And I waited for his letter till the sun went down, and he tried to be brave, sign of saying I love you, Mom, more than anyone. At the front line, fear in his eyes, he held his gun. He didn't want to be like all his friends, now dead and gone. He turned around and walked away, looked like his gun. Deserter, coward and cause for shame, they call my son. And I'm proud that in the midst of war, you had the strength to say no more. And if I could see you one more time, I'd hold your face and smile and say, I love you, son, more than anyone. I love you, son, more than anyone. I love you, son, more than anyone.
Tracy Curtis. Powerful, huh?
Yeah, yeah. So, at this point, I'm going to talk about about the media, and I would like to say that normally when we have a face-to-face evening, we would pass a bucket round and have a bucket collection, which obviously we can't do on Zoom, but Dave is going to put in the chat at some point when he's got a minute to think, somewhere where you can go and buy merchandise or CDs. So if any of you would like to financially support him this evening, obviously this has been a particularly difficult time for musicians. So that's something that you could do if you'd like to. And you have made your music very freely available on all sorts of platforms.
Yeah, I started doing that before it was fashionable.
You did. And I mean, you certainly appear to embrace all forms of media, and I wonder if that's because you like it, whether you enjoy it, or whether again it is kind of something that you feel like you have to do.
I mean, certainly in terms of writing, I enjoy writing different forms of writing, like songs and as well as prose, articles and stuff. And that is just entirely because I like, expressing, ideas in different forms. I think they're, really valuable different forms of expression. But in terms of getting music out there in different platforms and different forms of media, different and for in paid platforms and also for free and all sorts of different ways, that is very it's a rife subject. I mean, it depends on like what kind of answer I would give to that kind of question would depend on when we're talking about, right? Because like in the 90s and the early 2000s, if we wanted to give away our music or how much of it we wanted to give away, it was largely something we could choose. And also many of the major artists were not doing it. And so it was like
Sorry.
There's Jim Page. I recognize that. If
Yeah.
it were like that game show where like here please like a 1 second clip of a song. I know where that guitarist is. Yeah. Of course, I knew that there were only like 3 choices left or something, but
I'm so sorry I interrupted you.
No. But where were we? Let's see. We weren't talking about Jim Page. Now I'm thinking about Jim Page.
Yeah, well, you were talking about enjoying different ways of writing.
Yeah. So yeah, different. Yeah, there's like lots of different forms of writing for sure. But when it comes to putting your music out there on different platforms, that whole question is changes with the year, depending on what the different corporations are up to. And basically I would say there's the pre-2013 and post-2013, which is maybe only relevant for musicians rather than many other professions. But that's the year that Spotify started their free tier, and that's when basically merch sales plummeted and it basically collapsed for so many people around the world.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really remarkable what one venture capitalist entity can do to just completely undermine an entire industry globally, but that's what happened. So, they made the whole idea of giving away your music, it changed the whole thing. And for a lot of the consumers or people who just are listening to stuff, they don't realize the difference. But before Spotify sort of, became the platform, if we wanted to give away our music, we could do it in such a way that, for example, we got email addresses from people who downloaded our songs for free, which actually is an amazingly good trade, for a musician. That's like, I mean, you sound a bit like, Zuckerberg talking like this, but, because it's like stealing people's data or whatever, but they're giving it away freely. And it's like gold, because, I mean, nowadays that you don't have to explain that, why it's so useful to have so many people's emails when you're a musician, that's how that translates, fairly easily into, money without seeming too slimy. But obviously it does, because people come to your gigs, they buy your CDs or whatever if they're on your email list, if they liked your music enough to bother with it in the first place, that you ended up with their email. But that doesn't happen with Spotify. They control all that. You don't have access to your fans. You give your music up there, and then they do whatever they're going to do, and then they make the money, and they get all the access, and they give you little crumbs of capabilities to communicate with your fans, but you basically don't have any control. That's how it is now. So that's the complicated answer to a simple question. But
yeah. So I mean, have you found that it's much more difficult to earn enough money to keep your family going?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, because it's been this duel for so many of us here in all over the US, as well as in the UK, it's been this same problem of like the cost of housing, particularly in places like London and Seattle and New York, the cost of housing going up so much over such a short period of time, while actually for most workers, wages are stagnant. But for musicians, they've been basically cut in half. For people that used to make a living as musicians, it used to be that merch sales were like half of your income. So suddenly you're making half as much income. And then the other thing that goes along with the housing crisis for residential housing in both England and the US is what happens with commercial properties. Like all those people that run bars and cafes in London, New York, and everything, they can't afford to pay any performers anymore, because they can barely afford to pay the rent, or they can't. So they're disappearing, and they're shrinking. So you play in a number of different folk clubs in London that used to have twice as many people. They still have just as many people who want to come to the gigs, but now they can't fit in the venues that the folk clubs are having to use, because the bigger venues are no longer available.
Yeah.
So it's a multifaceted crisis pre-pandemic. Yeah. Of course, the pandemic is a whole other thing.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to have a listen to Jim Page. And this is quite a long piece, but Dave did say, if possible, he would like us to play all of it. And it is only 8:15, so I think we have got enough time to listen to the whole of it.
Also, if you want to cut it off, it's no problem, because people can hear it, on the web, later if they want better quality. But it'll give the flavor. The first few verses will certainly give the flavor of it very well, too.
Yeah.
Either way.
Okay. And I think this one is ready with no advert.
Came to Seattle, it was barely bigger than a small town. With the evergreen trees growing up, good rain coming down, it looked so innocent then. You'd never dream to take a glance at all those baby billionaires just waiting for their chance. Now a penny makes a nickel, makes a dime, makes a dollar, makes a kindergarten CEO wanna jump up and holler, turns a software magician with a fine and friendly face into a planetary predator with his fingers all over the place. He used to call it Seattle, chew the Puget Sound. We used to call it Seattle, now we call it Paul Allen Town. Now Seattle was too Amish, but that was Indian affairs, and so they turned him into a drinking fountain down at Pioneer Square. And the mountain was Tahoma, but that made their minds go blank. So they called it Rainier, and that became a bank, and the bank became a magnet for the money and the flash. And the mountain made of nature became a mountain made of cash. And the little baby billionaires broke out of their padded cells. And the little town got real big and everything went to hell. We used to call it Seattle, Jewel of the Puget Sound. We used to call it Seattle, now we call it Paul Allen Town. Paul Allen made his first millions in the Microsoft days. And then he multiplied those millions and he gave himself a raise. And he gazed out into the distance just as far as he could see. And everywhere he looked, he saw an opportunity, and he waved his wallet like a scepter and a sword. He said, there's nothing next to God that this wallet can't afford. Move over, Mr. Yester. Step aside and take a bow. My name is Paul Allen. This is my town now. We used to call it Seattle, Jewel of the Puget Sound. We used to call it Seattle. Now we call it Paul Allen Town. You like sports? He'll build you a stadium or two. Yeah, and he'll do it with your money, too. He owns Lake Union and the EMP. He owns half the city council, but he don't own me. You want to fondle your portfolio, you come to the right place. You like high-rise, go get yourself a condo with a happy face, with a Starbucks in every corner, and your own cash machine. Now, I know what they mean when they call it evergreen. We used to call it Seattle, Jewel of the Puget Sound. We used to call it Seattle, now we call it Paul Allen Town.
Oh.
Say Paul Allen plays a mean guitar, but I don't think that's right. I think they had four guitars in the hang. Right. Like some adolescent eagle with his billfold.
Jim Page. He's just got such a cutting wit with every line that I never noticed the song is 5.5 minutes long.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just happening in so many towns now, isn't it? That people just can't afford. I mean, Manchester, someone's put in the chat, you know.
Yeah.
Manchester,
I was wondering about that. What was that? This sounds like Manchester. Yeah.
The rents are just zooming up in Manchester. It's just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it is really. I mean, and then of course, and what's so maddening living in, I would say, venture to say, a city like Portland or Manchester, is having to then hear people coming in from places like Seattle or London talking about, oh, things are so cheap here. You know, you just want to fucking punch them. You know, I mean, some yuppie walking down the street like, oh, it's great. I found a 1-bedroom for $1,500. You know, I just let them pull my hair out or something. You know, it's just crazy what they're bragging about. You know, and then you know, I go visit places like San Francisco where I used to live, and you know, neighborhoods that are completely unrecognizable from when I lived there, and then hearing people talk who have obviously been living there for years, and for them the neighborhood is a certain kind of place, and they're talking about it like you know, old hands who have been living in this place, and they're talking about things that are just completely alien to what it was like before. You know, it's really quite something how capitalism can transform a place when it's unregulated like that.
Yeah. And you know, the fact that you see it in so many countries around the world, it's obviously not just an accident in, you know.
That's right, but you see it in you see it in a much more aggressive, much more destructive form in basically all of the Anglo countries. I don't know what it is about us Anglo countries, but like it really basically, Britain, Ireland, U.S., Canada, Australia is where it's just a total disaster, gentrification, and with most horrifically in the United States. But all those countries, it's really bad, and it's really like these things are going on. These forces exist in Scandinavia, in Germany, for sure. But there's just so much resisting those forces in those countries, like with government regulation and there's just so many people. I know so many more people who live in well subsidized housing situations, or they're in some kind of cooperative where they're owners and they're just not subject to these forces, whereas like half the people in the United States are renters and they're just completely subject to those forces. I'm not sure what the percentage of people is who live in co-housing or those kinds of places, but it's very high in Germany and Denmark compared to, places like England or the United States. Even though these countries are also very different from each other.
Yeah, yeah. So my last question always is there something on your bucket list? Is there something that you've never done that you would really like to do?
Oh gosh, yeah. There's just so many things. That's the maddening thing about mortality.
Is that apart from appearing again at Bolton Socialist Club?
Oh, I definitely want to do another gig at Bolton Socialist Club. That is very much on the bucket list. Absolutely. Yeah, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is I would love to go to Africa. I've never been to Africa, but I definitely as a person who's a fan of seeing the world and traveling, and there's so many places I've never been, but that's the one sort of major populated continent that I've never been to. So that's certainly a curiosity, but there's just so many lives I want to live and language that I want to learn, and I want to be so many different people. I just want to experience the world in a way that just doesn't seem anything close to possible for when you can only live one life, and that is an ongoing frustration for me. But I've come to terms with it to some extent, and I enjoy living my little life, and I feel less ambitious when it comes to trying to live multiple lives in one, because I've increasingly realized it's not possible. But I sure would love to find a way to I don't know about immortality, but I think I wish I had at least 300 or 400 years to explore the planet. Of course it'll change a lot in that time, but
yeah. Okay, so your last piece of music then is My Name is Troy Davis, Paul McAdam.
Paul McAdam, yeah, another brilliant songwriter, multi-instrumentalist. Currently, actually working on my upcoming album, which should be out by next month, which Paul is going to be playing music on and mixing as well. It'll be called Rebel Songs. But Paul is also a great songwriter. He also was the sort of producer of my album Strangers and Friends from a year ago. But he's a brilliant musician and a multi-talented person, songwriter, sound engineer. Yeah.
Okay, so this is another piece that is quite long, but it does kind of tell a story. So we are intending to play this one pretty much straight through. Unless
up to you. Vibe it out.
Yes. Yeah.
21st of September 2011. African-American ascended into heaven, murdered by the state of Georgia for a crime he did not do. His story now it will relate to you. Down in Savannah, Georgia, August 1989, police officer Mark McPhail was caught down in his prime. Outside a burger restaurant, an assault he had seen. He was shot down while he tried to intervene. Now the authorities in Georgia, they had much to do to apprehend the suspect. With hardly any clue, so they worked on many witnesses who did what they were told, and this travesty of justice did unfold. Well, my name is Troy Davis. I'm 41 years old. I did not commit this awful crime. I want the world to know. If the state decide to kill me, then be it on their hands. The blood of an innocent man. Call it what you want to. You can call it what you can. This is the blood of an innocent man. 20 years of rotting in this prison cell I've lain. I've seen evidence resurrected, many executions stayed. But through this awful nightmare, defiant rise to the star. I'm innocent, I did not kill this man. Oh, my name is Troy Davis, I'm 41 years old. I did not commit this awful crime, I want the world to know. If the state decide to kill me, then be it on their hands. The blood of an innocent man. Call it what you want to, you can call it what you can. This is the blood of an innocent man. Just before 11, on that sad September's night, for his veins were filled with poison, he kept up the fight. He said, I'm sorry for your loss, but the blame lies with another. I did not kill your father's son or brother. Oh, my name is Troy Davis, I'm 41 years old. I did not commit this awful crime. I want the world to know. If the state decide to kill me, and be it on their hands, blood of an innocent man. Call it what you want to, you will call it what you can. It's still the blood of an innocent man. To the people of this world, I have a message plain. It's up to everyone to see it. This never happens again. To end corruption and racism, we must make a stand. In the name of every innocent man. Oh, my name is Troy Davis. I'm 41 years old. I did not commit this awful crime. I want the world to know. If the state decide to kill me, then be it on their hands. The blood of an innocent man. Call it what you want to, you can call it what you can. This is the blood of an innocent man.
Mm. Another one I never noticed how long it was because it's just so good. I don't, yeah.
Yeah. But you need to hear the whole of the story, don't you, really? I think that one is really important to.
Yeah. I mean, with each new verse, it just gets more powerful, I think. So it's just, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Dave.
Oh, thank you, Julia.
Your morning.
It's been really fun. Now it's like, is it? Oh, it's afternoon now. Yeah. It's been really fun. Thanks. Such a pleasure joining y'all.
I don't know if anybody has got any questions that they would like to ask before we finish. Tony,
yeah. Questions, comments?
I'd like to ask a question.
Oh, sorry.
Hello.
Hi, my name's Nick. I'm from Rugby in Warwickshire. I'm a big fan. I'm not really from Rugby. I'm just living Rugby, by the way.
I've been to Rugby.
I'm a big fan. What I'm interested in, David, is that you're in a very, wobbly songsters. It's quite a deep tradition, isn't it, in the US?
Oh yeah.
And I think that we don't appreciate often on this side of the water how important the old, the big red songbook was to the propagation of the socialist gospel. And I think that we perhaps need to reclaim it. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know if there was any particular intention on the part of the the whole, I mean, basically the socialist and the Communist Party and the socialist movement of the 1930s and 40s and 50s 60s was very much got so much of its sort of cultural heritage from the Wobblies and other stuff that was going on before them, which is just perfectly natural, but that's certainly I think I'm not sure how later people were necessarily aware of that heritage, but there's, I think, a variety of reasons why that is, but and certainly today I don't think most people in the country know of what the IWW were, or that they ever existed, or that there's this whole there was this whole culture. But I think one of the brilliant things about the union was that it was a movement, and it was a movement with millions of participants, and music and theater and other forms of artistic expression were and cartoons were at the core of how they did popular education. And through these songs and everything else, they had a whole body of, a whole sort of cultural tradition that transcended all the different backgrounds of the participants, who were mostly from all over Europe. I mean, it was a largely immigrant union, so it was a mix of people who were from basically from the US and people from all over Europe, and as well as some folks from other countries as well. So, but they all knew these songs that were in the Little Red Songbook, and this was, I think, for a lot of people, it was also their introduction to the English language, and it was their introduction to a lot of political theory was through these songs, and in terms of like tactics, also if communicated through the songs. And which tactics to avoid as well. There's also lots of songs about Mr. Block and cartoons about Mr. Block, who was like the one you don't want to imitate. This is the one who makes all the wrong moves.
The Mr. Block songs are absolutely fabulous.
Yeah,
absolutely they still resonate today, I think, with those definitely. People, pseudo left people who like the idea of what we're trying to do, but don't really understand it. It's beautiful music.
Yeah, and for fascists, for National Socialists as well. I think the Mr. Block songs. Of course, they didn't have that back in the teens when the Wobblies were around. But
I read an amazing book recently about the way the FBI and the basically the state in the United States obliterated the folk movement, partly because of the Weavers and all those wonderful folk musicians. I think we've, you know, we were lucky to escape that in a way, partly, but in a way we were unlucky because we didn't realise what was going on. We didn't capture that music and that wonderful movement. Thank you very much for the evening. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I want to read that book, and there's a lot of new info about how much the FBI destroyed and worked to destroy a lot of careers, and people didn't realize until recently that some of their targets included Buffy St. Marie and Phil Oakes. Tony, where are you?
Yeah,
St. Marie, definitely.
Again, thoroughly enjoyed your choices. Some of my favourites and some absolutely brand new acts to me. But I was going back to what you said about Attila the Stockbroker. I come from a stand-up comedy background, and I did actually see you not at Bolton Socialist Club, but in Manchester's Northern Quarter with my good friends Dave Puller and Claire Mooney. I'm guessing 6 or 7 years ago. There was nobody talking at the bar that night. Everybody was hanging on your every word. But I wonder, as a seasoned performer, how you do deal with people talking when you're in the middle of your act. Do you just let it go, freedom of speech, or have you got particular strategies for tackling it?
Oh, it is such a ongoing, it's always an issue. I mean, depending on the venue and a lot of other factors. And it really drives me nuts, but it mainly drives me nuts because I know it's driving audience members nuts. And I really feel like the people that I most want to give a good concert to are the people that really wanted to hear this show so much that they came early and they sat down near the front, and they clearly want to be, able to hear every word. And then people come in and they're hanging around the periphery and talking. And I try to avoid the main way I try to avoid that kind of situation is by making sure when I'm planning gigs in advance with whoever's organizing the gig that it's very clear that nobody gets in without paying, and not because I'm greedy, but because you can't have the so-called regulars coming in to ruin the show. And it's usually the regulars who are doing it, the people that are normal, they're such regular drinkers at the bar that nobody wants to turn them away. And then sometimes they're going to pay the cover and they're just going to come ruin the show anyway. But very rarely will people actually pay a cover if it's like more than a couple of quid, but if they're paying a cover that's at least, something decent, then, more than the cost of a beer, then they're more likely to be quiet. And then of course, if the vast majority of people are quiet, then the few that might be talking are hopefully going to, figure it out and shut up. But and then the worst thing that sometimes happens is that the entire audience is paying attention to every word, but the fucking bar staff are talking with each other, and that just drives me absolutely bonkers, because they're the one people in the room who should understand how to behave at a concert, and they are just sabotaging the thing that they're being paid to attend. That really drives me nuts. But I don't know. I mean, strategies. I used to be really harsh to audiences when there were people talking, and I definitely, certainly one thing I've learned over the years is never call people out. Because it's not. You just don't know who they are and how they're gonna react, and also why they're talking. I mean, there's any number of reasons why they might be talking, and they're very good reasons in many cases. It's not because they're obnoxious or whatever, there's other possible reasons. And so I've learned a little bit of humility. So it still drives me nuts, but I tend not to talk about it or comment on it the way I did when I was in my 20s.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We have very good audiences at Bolton.
Oh, a Bolton the audience is fantastic. Oh no, the Bolton audience is perfect. No, they're ideal, absolutely. And I'm not just saying that. Lydia, are you?
I'm just I'm so delighted for you to have reminded us so starkly about the role of the troubadour, the political troubadour. We quite a lot of us here are part of the Bolton Socialist Choir, the Clarion Choir.
Ah, wonderful.
And we sing traditional songs. I'm just wondering, my question is, I hope you're writing are you writing about what's been going on in this last week?
Oh,
so
yes.
We can hold it in our minds forever.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote, well, first of all, before the siege leading up to the event, I wrote a open letter to Patriot Prayer and the Proud Boys, which is pinned to the top of my Facebook and Twitter, and it's published in Counterpunch, and which is where I publish most of my essays. And then which is counterpunch.org. So if anybody wants to read what I've written about 2020 and also last week, most of the essays I've written over the past year can be found. If you look counterpunch.org and look for my name, then it'll come up chronologically with the most recent at the top. And I also wrote another essay following the attack on the Capitol, sort of talking about various aspects of it. And I've been writing songs throughout the pandemic, and and throughout the protests that are basically also documenting. And I have a book, even a very limited run book of songs and essays from 2020. So yeah, I've definitely been doing a lot of documenting of what's been happening for whatever that's worth, it's a complicated thing.
Or maybe we can sing it as well.
Yeah, some of it you can read, others you can sing, and actually all of my essays I also turned into podcasts, so you can listen to them all as well. If you look for This Week with David Rovics on any podcasting platform, you'll also find all of my sort of audio essays, but also mixed in with them is all my interviews, because since the pandemic hit, I've been doing a lot of interviewing other people. Usually I've done actually hundreds now, usually 2 or 3 times a week. I've been interviewing people and putting them up on the web and out on podcast form. So I'm creating far too much content, just like most other musicians that are stuck at home during the pandemic, I think.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if people wanted to buy the new CD, the new album that's coming out, or any merchandise, where should they be looking?
Well, actually, that's a wonderful question. I love that. But the last physical album I put out was a vinyl record in 2018, and before that the last CD is 2015. But I've recorded a lot of albums since then, and they're all just only available online, on any of the streaming platforms, like wherever you listen to stuff these days, Spotify or Apple or Google or whatever. And they're all on Bandcamp as well. You can buy them, download them, and on Bandcamp they often come with extra stuff that you only get when you download them. But mainly I'm just putting up all my music for free, and then people can largely support me through Patreon, patreon.com/David Rovics, where people can support artists these days. So the crowd-funded model, you give away all your music, and then you sort of ask people for support through Patreon and give away extra special stuff that only is for the patrons. That's sort of the basic model these days. But then for people that actually want physical merch, I do have t-shirts, hoodies, and a lot of CDs, although not very current, and also vinyl records and all sorts of other things. But the cost of postage from here to Europe, or including here to England, is so insanely expensive. It's just crazy. But I don't know what's going on with postage, but I guess it's the internet and whatever economies of scale, but postage is insane these days. Domestically, it's not so bad here in the US, but if you're sending anything outside of the US, it's crazy how expensive it is now. So it's not a very good deal buying any of that merch unless you're getting a whole bunch of it.
Okay. So we should...
But the davidrovics.com/merch.
Right.
Sorry.
davidrovics.com.
Eileen's got a question.
Hey,
can
Eileen?
I just write that down? davidrovics.com, is that it?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, and then click merch if you want to look at the merch. Yeah, just recently updated.
Very good, thank you. Eileen.
Thank you, Dave. I've really enjoyed the evening.
Thank you.
Could you please spell? You tried to give us a website or something called Patriarch.
Yeah, Patreon, Patreon, so like patron, but with an E added in there, patreon.com. And then for me, patreon.com/David Rovics. But actually these days, a lot of artists, maybe most, have Patreon pages. It's become very standard now for how people are trying to survive in the post-merch era, and especially during the pandemic. I know that here in the US, artists are now, the average artist is now 65% of artists are fully unemployed during the pandemic, if they were working before. So it's definitely, I mean, crowd-funded patronage like Patreon has become the norm for years now, but that's really been accelerated in 2020.
Well, thank you very much, and again,
thank
you.
you. Thank you. Anybody else? Wendy, you were waving there? Anna. Okay.
No, you don't want to say anything, Wendy. Just agreeing with people.
And who's waving in that iPad? You're muted. If anybody wants to say anything, just unmute yourself.
Give it to Mike and Sue.
I'm not sure if she wants to say anything or if she's just waving.
Yeah, I don't know. Anything over there? Their iPad is called iPad. I like their iPad called iPad.
Sorry, I've just made contact with friends.
I see you're just waving at friends there. Okay, good.
David, our friend in
I
Wales,
love
John
Zoom.
Holmes, has organised gigs for you down in South Wales.
Oh, excellent.
And he joined the call tonight because he wanted to listen to what your Desert Island discs were. Well, I haven't seen him for ages because we both used to live in the Midlands together.
Oh, wonderful.
And, so you've brought us together. David, thank you very much.
How are you guys?
Great.
You're up. Oh, good.
Wonderful. So, I think that's about it for this evening here. Thank you very much. Next month, we've got Adrian Meany, who is one of the spooky men and did come and perform with the Fistful of Spookies at Bolton Socialist Club. So I'm sure a lot of you will remember Adrian. So he's going to be doing his Desert Island disc next month.
Adrian Meany, but he's not one of the blue meanies. I love.
No.
Look, Julia.
Sorry?
Have you got a date?
Yes, I have. She says, looking for her diary.
Rather a question. Have you got a date?
There are some of us who forget. Yeah.
David, while she's gone, thank you so much for this evening.
Oh, thank you. It's a real pleasure.
Really
fun.
appreciated your time.
It was fantastic.
Absolute pleasure.
Really
it's
fun.
a really nice, fantastic performer.
Oh,
and it's a
thank
real delight to hear some of the things that you enjoy and some of the music you wanted to share. Thank you so very much. We really, give our love to Portland, give our love to Oregon. Thank you so much for coming aboard tonight. We really enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Pleasure. Hope to see you all in Bolton sometime in the physical world. Yeah.
So the date in March will be
March.
Oh no, February, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've been watching
We'll
lots
have March.
Contributing to lots of things like folk ensembles and lighting, which are
the 19th, Friday the 19th of February.
Thank you, Julia.
Adrian Meany. Take care.
Wendy,
everybody.
thanks for your email.
And your card.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
We're the people at the back of the bar talking, David, when you're performing.
Perfect. I love it.
It's like Friends Reunited here, isn't it?
Julia.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw my message, but I've had a bit of dealings with John O'Neill from the Undertones, who wrote Teenage Kicks.